Greetings, comrades, and welcome to the Eastern Border. Well, I don't even know how to start this episode this time. There's a saying in Russian: "Never had this happened ever, and now look again." Or "Никогда такого не было, и вот опять." Or my favorite one: "You'll laugh, of course, but." Oh yeah, by the way, to those of you who don't understand, that joke comes from a old Soviet political joke, which was very kind of active during the times of Brezhnev, Chernenko, and Andropov. You know, we call them starpere, or old farts, and they basically were the last remnants before Gorbachev, who were of the old guard, so to speak, and they died in a row very quickly, like Brezhnev, then there was Chernenko, then Andropov, and the full joke is that after Andropov dies, then, you know, the average Soviet citizen turns on the TV, and then the commentator, the talking head there says, "Dear citizens of the Soviet Union, you'll of course laugh, but our country has been visited by an enormous tragedy again." I mean, that's the thing, because obviously they were supposed to say, "Our country has been hit by an enormous tragedy," but at that time they were passing away so quickly that, you know, people started making jokes about how they were different. Another one of the good ones was the fact that what's the difference between Brezhnev and Chernenko? Brezhnev ran on batteries, but Chernenko needed to have a wall plug. That's because Brezhnev at the end of his life was really struck with dialysis apparatus, but Chernenko had that, but in a even worse form. So now I can use one of these both. I suppose really my favorite, "You'll laugh, of course, but our country has been struck by a tragedy yet again," is the more kind of relevant one to this, what I'm going to describe to you today. Because I remember a couple of months ago, I think it was 2 months ago, maybe 3, we had this idea, we had this news, not the idea, sorry, because again, overwork. We had these news that there was another terrorist attack in Russia. Well, not Crocus, that Crocus massive one, that's in the background, but we had the situation where the local prisoners took over at that point the kind of the police isolator. Well, it's happened again, this time in prison. And I'll be quoting Ribar here. It's one of the biggest kind of news sites. He also comments on Mali and Africa and tries to be more of a professional. I would presume, if you could call a Z News channel that way, more of a professional person kind of talking about this whole mess. And he wrote in various posts, which I have combined and translated, that in Surovikino, Volgograd region, Islamists from ISIS, by the way, they really claim to be ISIS, took several FSIN, that is Russia's prison service, employees hostage during a meeting of the disciplinary commission in Penal Colony 19. According to media reports, one of the attackers was previously convicted of a terrorist attack, and there were dead among the employees. At least 7 people were injured, at least one FSIN employee was killed, and several others wounded. Now, the thing is that the rest of these people, they called themselves ISIS at the beginning, and one of them declined that and said that's just the revenge of the treatment of Muslims in Russia, because, you know, after the Crocus attack, no, they didn't catch the real perpetrators at all. They just captured random Caucasus-looking guys, you know, from Central Asia, Tajikistan, that kind of end, and just tortured them and made them basically confess and everything. And this guy was angry, but they had ISIS symbolics and everything, and so they really were tied to all this situation. And there was a pretty horrible scenes online with them just cutting throats, and it was pretty violent. And it was like just very weird. They truly took advantage of this disciplinary session, and then they just took control of this with using like combat ammunition and knives and everything, because apparently previously these Penal Colony 19 employees had been under accusations and undergoing trial themselves for taking bribes, because that's how you let ISIS take over your colony and everything. And there was like a huge situation there. They called the local imam and local religious leaders to kind of tone down the situation. At one point, At one point, there was this point where they demanded $2 million and a helicopter. Well, obviously, it ended totally differently. It was just weird. There was an assault by Russian Spetsnaz over there. All hostages were saved. One of the employees was taken to the hospital. There were 3 dead. And all militants were eliminated instantly, because that's how Russian government works. They don't need to investigate anything. They don't need to find out information about who was corrupt, because I pretty much suspect that the local SWAT team was also involved in all this situation, like all of this mess and corruption. It was reported that all the militants were eliminated. There were no casualties among hostages and personnel of law enforcement agencies. But in this whole situation, one of the employees also was heavily wounded and then taken to hospital with serious situation. And apparently, one of the terrorists tried to activate one of those suicide belts and was liquidated in advance. According to official data of the Federal Penitentiary Service of Russia, that's the FSIN, 4 terrorists were holding captive 8 employees of IK-19. 4 of them died of stab wounds, 4 more were taken to the hospital. So, yeah, all the terrorists were eliminated. 4 convicts were injured, random convicts, not involved with this. Well, it is what it is, because obviously. But we wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be talking about this if the official viewpoints and this cold analytical view was everything going on there. Now, we had also the channel called Older Than Edda, Starshi Eddi, who's a prominent neo-Nazi Zed Vatnik channel, who also wrote about this whole mess, and he wrote just 3 posts as it was going, and I'm going to read all 3 to you so that you understand the whole mindset of this whole situation, because, well, apparently that's what we do now here on this show, because, well, I have to say thank you, because I've gotten a positive feedback on how you actually enjoy this insanity and these motivations of these pro-war activists. So here we go. Older Than Edda posted at first, 4 Central Asian migrants seized the colony with knives, stabbed several FSIN employees, took someone hostage and wounded the colony chef. Surrealism. Then, after everything happened, after his next post about this whole mess was, quote, the pigs that took over IK-19 in Volgograd were utilized, but without multiple instances of toughening or of punishment, multiple times toughening of conditions of detention of such characters, and without collective responsibility of relatives and friends, because obviously they are huge fans of collective responsibility. I wonder if when we'll take them all to Hague, they will be such fans of any such collective punishment. But then, Older Than the Edda continues, there will be more and more such cases. By such cases, I don't just mean the colony takeover. I mean the general criminality of Central Asian people in general. And then he continues his very racist post further on. The Jamatniks, from the word Jamal, have been eliminated. The problem remains. The problem is not even in the FSIN as such, although everything needs to be changed there. But reforming the FSIN by itself is like relaying parquet floors in a house with a leaky roof. It will swell and shake again anyway. And the roof is leaking in our country against the background of visa-free entry and mass importation of Central Asians into Russia. And the atmosphere in this region is still trying to represent the Tashkent of the 1980s. But it's not the 1980s there anymore, and people are not coming to us from Tashkent. People from Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and other local countries come to us from the poorest regions, where even in the USSR, things were not all right. And now they have returned to dark savagery, even to the point of trying to hunt for a Negro, mistaking him for a genie. Because obviously you have to be super racist towards black people while you're being racist towards the people from Central Asia. That's how they operate. And like it wasn't forced on this guy. I mean, there was no relation to black people here, but he just had to do it because that's who they are. But I have to finish this quote. And it only seems funny if we're dealing with people who naturally live in the 15th century and produce enough radicals from their environment to make life around them hell. What can be done? Introduce a visa regime and strict quotas for migration. And this is in addition to everything that has been said about the reform of the Federal Penitentiary Service itself. And of course, exclude the situation when a radical from both Soviet Central Asia goes to Russia only because he knows for sure that it will be easier for him there than at home, where the local KGB will liquidate him so that no one will even remember him. And you see, that's how they operate. I mean, no one forced him to make, no one forced him to be super racist in this post, but then they did it anyway, because that's how they all operate. Now, I wanted to read you another comment on this whole situation by a person that I consider one of my mentors, Alexander Nevzorov. He hasn't been on the show for a while because he's mostly busy with doing, as now a Ukrainian citizen, he's busy covering all the military stuff, but he normally just posts snippets and it's not very quotable. But for this, he really posted a very intelligent comment, which also shows, like I've said, that this radicalization and ethnic hatred inside Russia will be going on for sure. And what needs to be taken into account is the fact that recently there in St. Petersburg municipal elections, one of the candidates running there was a very pro-Russian ultranationalist who built all of his campaign on bashing the local Uzbek diaspora. Just before this happened, by the way. And the local Uzbek diaspora leader, well, he's not a good guy as well. He's been sending people, tearing off various agitation from this ultra neo-Nazi from the Russian side. But he's also a candidate from United Russia, Putin's party. So obviously, this neo-Nazi guy was sent away and not accepted. So that caused a bit of a panic here. But then this act of terrorism happened, which means that now all these neo-Nazis are super radicalized. So that's going to be a fun event happening. But I just now want to get to the Nevzorov's comment about this whole situation. Quote, hostage-taking in the Russian Federation has already become a popular prison triathlon. It's this sport brightens up the dreary everyday life of prisoners and allows not only convicts, but also overworked FSIN officers to stretch their legs. Of course, not everyone makes it to the finish line, and sometimes there are survivors, but mostly Putin's special orcs try to make sure that not only the thieves die, but also the hostages. As a rule, employees or third parties of no official or tribal value are sacrificed. Taking into account the fact that the victims, as a rule, are themselves dirty in the sale of weapons, means of communication, and explosives, the ugly testimonies of them will only spoil a picture of the FSIN idyll. However, according to the instructions from above, lives are always spit on, not only in the prison triathlon. The method of framing and sacrificing hostages was worked out in the era of Beslan, and since then it has been continuously improved. Today's tournament in Penal Colony 19 is not out of tradition. The FSIN let all their colleagues slaughtered with small Bowie knives and then killed the villains, took pictures of the corpses and left for lunch. Victory over the rioters was easy. It was a simple pleasure to shoot convicts with butterflies and hammers from rooks and kedders. However, in the prison triathlon, as in any sport, it's not victory that matters, but participation. Everyone got what they wanted. The villains are already wandering the allies of Junnat, paradise, and scandalizing about the plumpness of the Guiras, the FSIN slaughtered. Their posthumous medals and the special orcs, a supplement, well, that's what they received, and a prize glass. The event is strife in these times. Already tomorrow, it will be forgotten. That's Alexander Nevzorov with a translation by me. But obviously, this wasn't the only thing that really startled and angered all these vatniks. And we'll get back to our regular segment and, well, program as supposed and as you were expecting. But first, a short message from, well, myself. Again, thank you to all of our patrons, and I, as usual, invite you to become one if you can afford it, and if it's okay with you, of our Patreon on patreon.com/theeasternborder, or better yet, and I actively encourage you guys who are my patrons, if you can manage this, go to our website, theeasternborder.lv, click the merch link, and move your membership over there. Because again, at the end of 2025, I'm going to have to basically switch my Patreon to monthly, and then lose all of you there who are already subscribing there, which is sort of bad. So if you're thinking about becoming a member, please move to the fourth wall membership if you can, possibly, and then you can more control your expenses there. It's the link is on our website. It's pinned up there. It's our merch store. The same thing gives memberships. It's the fourthwall.theeasternborder.com. It's hard to kind of pronounce here. But yeah, we still have some time and we'll organize this. But in general, if you want to support the show, please, you can do it in Patreon. But know that we're going to have to do some some rough things there at the end of 2025, or if you want to just support me personally with a one-time donation, then just click the donate button on the easternborder.lv website, where, by the way, you can also set up a monthly thing. And I really hate doing all this shilling, but yeah, thank you for your support, because that's how we function here. By the way, today my little brother's 2 kids have arrived, and we're taking care of them. So if there are any random noises, please forgive me. That's just a thing. Well, I'm recording, by the way. Evit is taking care of them, and I hope that everything goes smoothly. And I'm not in for an interesting surprise that I need to fix my TV or computer again after I leave this room. No, just a joke. They're like 7 and 8 years old. They should be mostly fine, hopefully. But now we should go back to the Z authors, and not just about this whole incident with hostage taking, which has become like a national sport in Russia, but there were interesting situations. See, in Z channels, everyone was kind of shocked but impressed by the speech of one Professor Yevstayev on Solovyov Live. Yes, I also watched Solovyov Live for you, because that, by the way, hurts my brain cells more than reading all the Z channels, because this was interesting. The whole Z channels, they mostly posted about how finally someone has started to tell the TV. They were very surprised, and I was surprised too, because this Professor Yevstayev is technically a political science professor in one of Moscow's universities, and he's a common guest on Solovyov Live on Prime TV, like first channel of Russian public broadcast television, where they always just praise Putin and do like crazy stuff, just worshiping him and doing nothing just crazy, and like they just go like straight through the party line and just always focus on that. But this time he said something that was just interesting, because again, the internal Russian society seems to be getting more and more divided, because if this is happening in primetime television, like on the most public propaganda center Russia has, then that's truly something. And here's what he said online, like on live TV in the Solovyov Live, run by Vladimir Solovyov, the biggest piece of shit that I know when it comes to all the Russian propagandists. Quote: "Our authorities were awarded the colossal credit of people's trust this spring." He talks about Putin's event formerly known as elections, where he basically just drew up a result of 88% and wasn't even ashamed of it. But, these guys normally praise Putin, but, just follow it with me. "But it would be a big mistake to think that this credit of trust is inexhaustible, to think that it is eternal and untouchable. If it's spent the way it has been spent over the past probably 2.5 months, I'm afraid that we are in for some very big political problems. Us, the whole country, every single one of us, they're waiting. Because the enemy," here he obviously speaks about Ukrainians, "is fighting not for life but for death, our death. He's fighting for his own survival. And we have too many of them, both in the political elite and around it. And they all proceed from the fact that the main task is to return everything to February 21st. Again, I didn't misspeak. Not on the February 23rd, not on the 24th, on the 21st, at the moment when Russia recognized the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics as independent states. Well, something, of course, of the conquered, is going to stay with us, like Crimea, where too many people have bought their estates. Give something to the plebs too. But too many people want it all back. And a castle in France, and a mansion in London, and a penthouse in New York, and a luxury villa in Dubai. And I have to add a fancy mansion on the coast of Komi, like Lake Komi. But he wouldn't say that because, can't really offend Solovyov that much with his own Italian mansions and lakes and everything. He just stopped there as, he wanted to get paid. But here again, if I have to specify all this mess, because this is Solovyov's channel. You don't get to go anywhere much anymore, do you? That's a big problem too. I'm a very loyal person. I really want to trust our state. But even I, with my biography, with my genetics, begin to distrust our state. And what do people think in the Moscow and St. Petersburg subways, where our big bosses don't go anymore? And you see, that's a big thing, because if this goes into the primetime propaganda channels, oh boy, something's going to go down, because this is really, really big, like crazy big. Another thing that really impacted all these Z authors was the fact that they were saddened by the missile attack on a ferry carrying fuel tanks to Crimea. Rybar wrote about it, quote, "More important are the unseen consequences of the attack. In addition to the loss of fuel tanks, the ferry service was suspended, which will affect fuel supplies to the peninsula as well as the functioning of the port itself. Of course, these are solvable problems and they are temporary in nature, but in general they fit into the Western plan to defeat Russia's energy infrastructure. Sharply jumped fuel prices in southern Russia are proof of that, and they are trying to cut the connection with Crimea." Another channel, Don RF, wrote, quote, "This sucks. No, that's really fucked up. The ferry is lost for logistics anyway. 30 tankers is okay, it's just money. But the ferry, it's very expensive and time consuming. We need an answer. We need an answer for a week now, if only for public morale." And the ferry is important here because they truly struck, like the Ukrainians have been striking more and more and way more actively last few days. And like the gas refinery station where tons and tons of various fuels are held, it's still burning for the 6 days straight. And the ferry system exists to transport fuel and other supplies to the occupied Crimea because they are now wary of using the Kerch Bridge, since Ukraine often strikes at that. So that's just they're just quite crazy. And now they've blasted this ferry. I mean, it makes sense since Ukraine has total dominance of all the maritime routes at this sea, Azov Sea anyways. Yekaterina Markova, Z. All these Z Vatniks always add some sort of Z there. I love it. She writes, quote, "I hope our bosses have a plan." They don't. "To recover quickly and avoid fuel shortages, as well as protecting the land corridor. Otherwise, the peninsula risks being isolated. And probably the military in Crimea has enough equipment in case of an enemy offensive, all sorts of copters, drones, REBs, artillery. Or we still need to send some humanitarian aid." I'm going to read the defense ministry's post. So they say, is everything there or what? "The SOFA troops have little doubt the West, the evil West, will allow Ukraine to use the entire arsenal of supplied weapons on our territory. But maybe there is something we don't see or understand. And maybe there are some new Minsk, Istanbul, Washington, London agreements. Maybe this time we, so smart and decent, will not be deceived and will not be cheated." Yeah, you will, because nothing else will happen. This is going to be just crazy and stupid as usual. Now, Lobayev's Z, they all add Z for the most part, writes, "The worst thing in the ongoing chain of events, Kursk, nuclear power plants, airfields, ferry," we'll get to the airfields, that's the next part, "is that the moment for use of demonstrative nukes," yes, I picked this one because it speaks of nukes, "has been missed. Earlier, namely the very beginning of the special military operation, it was possible to do away with, to just intimidate the West with just a nuclear test, and then a little later with a single innocent strike, say at the Yarovo test site. None of this will work now. These are half measures, completely devoid of sense, because the enemy is intoxicated with permissiveness, and it will not be impressed at all. Now, to achieve the desired effect, well, we will need a massive strike from 200 warheads and more. Will our leadership go for it? Something tells me that it will not." Lobayev said. And I agree with him. I mean, look, if Putin wanted to intimidate West with doing something nuclear, he would have done a small, the test or something early in the war. Now it seems like totally unlikely. Even the Z authors, with terrible sadness, with horrible sadness and pain, they truly just have decided to give up. There's going to be no nuclear strike. And recently, by the way, I found a new channel that I now use to pull up some comments. Because if you remember, I spoke about Colonel Kvachkov, the crazy guy from the Club of Angry Patriots fame, right? And he went to live in a monastery, but apparently he's tired of it. Or he lives there and still posts on Telegram, because he and his crazy ultra-Orthodox socialism, when everyone goes back to serfdom and farms and worships Tsar sort of communism way, I don't know what that means, but he defends it and whatever, right? He now has his own Telegram channel very separately, and I love it, because he writes about this whole situation the following, quote, "The worst thing is when you start to believe and live under the influence of your own propaganda. I mean, objectively true. For decades, the presidential administration has been busy creating virtual schemes in which life in the Russian Federation was wonderful. It does not matter that the scheme did not correspond to any reality whatsoever. After all, its truthfulness cannot be verified by everyone at the same time. When the war came, apeshkas, or active propagandists, started doing the same thing. Not fleeing from under Kharkov, but regrouping, not surrendering Kherson, but difficult decisions, etc. And again, thinly and barely, but it worked. And because it worked, the government and its servants believed in their own propaganda. The Kursk nuclear power plant was shelled. That, by the way, hasn't happened, only the surrounding buildings which control the energy production. But again, we're asking these guys to have brain cells, which is literally impossible, so don't pay attention to such details. But the whole meaning there is pretty much what I've been also saying for a while. Putin genuinely believes his own propaganda nonsense at this point because, he shouldn't have even started this whole mess at all. But now, well, he's going to pay. But carrying on. The Kursk nuclear power plant was shelled. Nonsense. It's the fall of a drone. They sank a ferry? A trifle. Just an unsuccessful ferrying of fuel. Invaded the Kursk region. No big deal. It's just a provocation. And when they pull to The Hague, and they will, that's an addition from me because I truly believe that they will. In principle, it's no big deal either. Just a change of scenery. New people, a different microclimate. New emotions, and negative success. So, pretty good channel to follow. I think it's really, really amazing. However, the big thing that I really want to focus on is that Anastasia Kashavarova. Oh, you know her by now. You know her. You love her. I think we need her t-shirts as well. She, by the way, hates Girkin, hates the 13th, the 13th channel, and just goes all wild here. See, normally, I'm picking her again because she's one of the biggest Z channels, and usually Z authors for text in the genre of the wrong people, how Russians are all horrible, they choose a specific group of Russians, either Muscovites, vacationers, residents of Kursk region who do not take up arms, and so on. Anastasia Kashavarova decided to hit them all at once. Proper propaganda work does not slack if you yell at the Russians being the wrong people because they're not fundamentally interested in going and dying in this stupid war, except, a certain subsphere of either misinformed idiots or Z idiots. So, now she decided to hit them all at once. The soldiers are bad, the relatives of the victims are infantile, the people are unfit, and we can't even talk about officials. So it's just great. Quote, unfortunately, for several years now, I have been observing the catastrophic unwillingness of Russians to know the truth. It is not only people in power who want to hide something. Russians themselves do not want to know the truth. For starters, I want to applaud here because, wow, lady, you're speaking the truth for once. It's amazing. It's better to live in a fictional reality. Again, this is not me. This is not me saying all these things. And I've been saying them in my podcast since 2017 about how that whole system of information propaganda works. And it's coming on here because even the main propagandists, they're posting this nonsense. They're posting this openly because this is how it functions. And I love it because all the Western apologists for Putin's regime, they know nothing about how this works. Because this is it. This is just great. But I'd rather have to finish through this. My side comments just make me easier. It makes it easier for me to survive through this mess. It's better to live in a fictional reality. It's calmer. Otherwise, you have to act and work, and that means changes and serious ones. An infantile person does not like change and activity because he never takes responsibility. He is afraid of it. That, by the way, is what I personally call a post-Soviet mentality, which I've been fighting against. Well, over here in Latvia and other Baltic states and other states of the region, it's happening more or less successfully. In Russia, they never even attempted to try to fix anything. But carrying on. Federal Moscow does not want to know the real problems of the front and the population, and every second family of a missing person is sure that he has no memory and is in captivity, and there is no news from the person for 2 years of a war. We have a lot of requests for help in getting the status of a prisoner of war, and there is no proof of captivity, but there is proof of death, as if the status affects the fact that a person was mysteriously, at once dead and resurrected. Tell me, should I lie to these people to appease them, or are they worthy of the truth? Officials, the military, are swatting away the families of our fighters like pesky flies, blocking them out. We answer thousands of questions every day, thousands of repeated questions, most of which are absolutely stupid. But these are our men. If they don't get information, they will go to the enemy. Knowing the truth is hard, but it can save the lives of hundreds and thousands. Again, Ms. Kashavarova, you're totally correct about this. If you guys would know the truth about and wouldn't fall for this dumb propaganda that Kashavarov is spreading, the war wouldn't have started and hundreds and thousands of lives would be saved. But I'm pretty sure it didn't mean that because, again, it's a brain cell issue, like skill issue, but worse. Knowing the truth, and most importantly, accepting it, you will not write a stupid law. You will not leave the inhabitants under attack, and it will be easier to solve problems. I knocked on all doors, wrote reports, proposed a lot of solutions, drew attention to the fact that it is necessary to inform the population from the state channels about how the enemy works in the information field, that there are OSINT aggregates, all information in chat rooms and knows where and in what direction, how many missing, dead, and relatives published the date in open access. What have I encountered? Deep indifference to the fate of the country, or comments of the sort, why do you tell the truth? Are you working for the enemy? The truth must be presented in a special way to motivate. Tell me, are you motivated by all is well on the federal channels? I see everyone is so motivated that we shouldn't do anything, because they said on the first channel that everything is under control. The first channel, by the way, is the one that I gave you the quote about, where they finally have started saying that not everything is under control. And that's scary, because that means stuff is, borked to beyond all recognition. But she continues. You are not motivated by anything, neither good or bad. You just need others to fight for you in the rear and in the front. You need a special pitch to pour condensed milk on shit, apparently. Then it will motivate you. An information center works for people like you. You want to die in ignorance, and I want to be able to survive, save the country, and save as many people as possible. That's the difference between truth and lies. And now you can enter in a bit of situation there where you can quote Chernobyl, I suppose. But this is what I've been saying. They're just incompetent, and for some reason these Z channels, they continue on fighting for this Russian government, which is they yell at it. They open up all the criticisms that Ukrainians and people like me have been saying since the beginning of the war, and they still consider that to be a thing where someone else wants to live in. Then they sort of blame the Ukrainians for fighting against them as being brainwashed by the evil West and do every conspirological thing ever, but they simply cannot accept the fact that no one wants to live in this dysfunctional neo-Nazi government that Putin has built. No one wants to live under this kleptocracy. And it's all just insane, really. And other news about this whole success of Ukrainians and how the government is doing. Z author Roman Alyokhin ends his discussion of fortifications in Kursk and Belgorod regions with an unexpected conclusion for Z author. He openly states that it turns out that the Ukrainian military command is much more professional and focused on victory than the Russian one. And that's just crazy because, of course, he hates Ukrainians, but these guys who are very pro-Putin, they have to admit that there's something deeply, deeply wrong with the Russian state. Quote, now a new wave of fortification construction in the Kursk region has begun. The year before last, I participated in the construction in the Glushovsky district. How and who distributed fortifications on the terrain is not known, but many of these fortifications were in the lowlands, half filled with water, which is constantly pumped out. I think in the end they were abandoned and money and time was wasted. And now I'm talking to my friends, they're digging near one of the villages in 1 meter of water, and this is in the dry summer, when it went almost everywhere. In the fall, the trenches that we dig, that is the Russians, will be full of water. And the question is again, whether it's a waste of money or sabotage. According to reports, everything will be done, but in fact soldiers will not be able to be there. And this was most likely the case in all border areas because the terrain there is swampy. The Ukrainians take advantage of the good weather. In the fall, in many places, it will not be only difficult but impossible to drive except on asphalt roads. After Ivanov's, one of the generals here, he was considered to be Shoigu's person and very much super corrupt. And obviously that didn't fix anything because nothing in the Russian army fixes itself, even when you just point straight at the problem. Just crazy. After Ivanov's arrest, I thought something would improve in the construction of fortifications. It seems that arrogance is firmly rooted in the army's management. Well, no shit, Sherlock. That's exactly what's happening. And then he writes about Belgorod. I went to Belgorod yesterday and was stunned to see where the fortifications are being built, between Belgorod and Kursk. According to Telegram, 15 billion rubles have been spent on fortifying sections of the Kursk region alone. That's about 270,000 FPV drones. Should we compare the effectiveness of fortification in Kursk region being built wastefully like this and 270,000 FPV drones? And if we deduct from this amount 30 million rubles for communication, it seems to me that with such a number of drones and good communication, the border guards, reinforced by our units, would slowly clear the Sumy region in 2.5 years. Oh yeah, by the way, if you want to know about rubles, basically 1 ruble, like 100 rubles is $1 approximately. So, well, 15 billion rubles, I think, is what, $150 million approximately. Based on the results of the management of the front in Kursk region, someone asked the question, for whom were the fortifications really built? Who uses them now? And the question to our managers and commanders, what will happen if now our units try to drive between the fortifications on the roads? Will it work? The invasion of the Kursk region showed the main thing. The enemies, that's the Ukrainians, command, and he just writes it in all caps, is more motivated to win. They can manage more flexibility and make decisions quickly, including non-standard ones. At the same time, it was here that the monstrous difference in the level of management and the real patriotism of the commanders become apparent. And so far, no changes are visible. Because, yeah, you see, Ukrainians are fighting to win the war. Russian commanders are fighting to get a medal and get promoted, and they couldn't give, like, any shits about the common soldier or the people, and everyone knows this. And that is just insane and crazy. But here I come to an interesting situation, because I promised you to get to the airfield, and I'm getting to that as the last part of this episode, because Z channels are very sadly also discussing the Ukrainian drone strike on the Marinovka airfield. This was important because, again, Ukrainians have been striking a lot these days, and let's just say some bird told me that this whole attack in Kursk region is by no means the last one. There are other plans, and I won't uncover more details here yet, but let's just say I have a good hunch, that there's going to be more interesting events happening in the next 2 weeks. So this is why I'm back to making quite a lot of episodes, and I think this is going to be the last episode this month that I charge patrons for, and after that all the episodes will be free. But that's just another side note. Let's just get to this whole mess with the airfield. The Z authors draw the following conclusions: the strikes will not stop. Light shelters, that were, by the way, built by volunteer money, do not save even from drones. When UAVs will be replaced by missiles, it will no longer be possible to take airplanes out from under attack. And how to go to full-scale war with NATO in this state of affairs is also completely unclear. Aviahub writes, quote, satellite images of damage to the Marinovka airfield have appeared. If quality REB, that is radioelektronnaya борьба, if someone didn't know, REB is anti-drone warfare, radio electronic combat. I just leave REB over there because I don't want to switch the terms to proper English ones, because I didn't understand what was that at the beginning. So when I say REB, I mean radio electronic combat. Just that's radioelektronnaya борьба in Russian, but so that you know, in case you didn't. If quality REB air defense systems in the right quantity and mobile fire groups are cheaper than this, then okay. By the way, these hangars were made with funds from the volunteers. Our favorite channel, 13. I mean, this guy has a swearing bot. I have to say that to you, but he's the most fun to quote at any time. And he, by the way, posts about like 100 messages on Telegram every day, and most of them are video ones. And it really melts my brain, because this guy is also under criminal charges inside Russia, and he's illegally fighting for this mess where he went in 2015. Then he apparently came back to Moscow and then shot 2 people dead who were these migrants, because he's a total neo-Nazi and associated with Wagner and Rusich. And he's like under investigation, and he's being tracked in Russia itself. So, and he's just posting these videos and yelling that he has ties with Wagner. Look, it's a mess, but he's one of the most fun Z channels to follow through if like me, you don't value your sanity too much. So he writes, Ukrainians, well, he says other words, but I'll just use Ukrainians. Ukrainians have fucked up our military airfield near Volgograd. It seems that the defense ministry is having some kind of competition to see who can fuck up the most equipment. Vehicles, and fuel, not to mention personnel. What did you graduate from the academies for? Do I have to tell you how to counteract this? You could reach the wall more than the dementia patients could fuck themselves. It's like direct quotes, and he's going insane. Voyevoda broadcasts comments. Satellite images of Marinovka I do not want to comment. People are alive. Blatant lies, because they really lied about their losses, and Voyevoda and the next person I'm going to quote, Fighter Bomber, they used to be more fair against about their kind of all of these results, but now they're just blatantly lying about their loss numbers, because we've seen really images of this mess, and people were like military personnel was hit, so were airplanes. So yeah, when they claim no losses like this guy and the following one, then just they have barely a single brain cell among all of them, so, let's not blame them. They just want to... They've been bonked on the head with people saying what to say for propaganda reasons, so, it is what it is. So, carrying on. People are alive, and thank God for that. I'm honestly fucked up writing about it every time. Nobody gives a fuck. They're just UAVs. They're just slow-moving UAVs. Imagine, for a minute, if NATO decided to go to war with us, with the use of at least 1,500 cruise missiles on such targets as airfields. And I agree with him. I mean, I'm really happy that the United States finally allowed to conduct missile strikes in part of the Kursk operation. Because I'm pretty sure that, a single ATACMS missile or a couple of blasts straight up by rockets in this area, they're going to have great results. Because, well, at this point, the Russian army really has advantage in the air. This is why, by the way, the Pokrovsk region is suffering a lot, because that's where they focus everything, and that's where they're most concentrated. And the fact that Russian airstrikes are so numerous there, that allows them to move in Pokrovsk region. If those would be stopped, that would be great, because then Russians would just stop moving, like, basically completely. So this means that these people, as now these missile strikes have been allowed, I believe that this will be a very positive result, because they are very much afraid of them. And now Fighter Bomber, like I said, he lies about the casualty numbers, but that's okay. Everything else he's like correct about, because he also writes about these NATO given possibilities. On the Marinovka attack, we are now pulling out on withdrawals from the strike for the sole reason that Ukrainians' UAVs are flying so slow and so long that we have time to raise the air force, and the Ukrainians hit the empty airfield. It wasn't empty. Multiple planes were destroyed, but again, I warned you about this. They fuck everything in the world, and everything is shut down. And of course, they report that it's only debris hitting purely by chance, and they scatter what's left as unnecessary and unimportant. The nice reporting by Ministry of Defense shows that they learn nothing. Tomorrow, Ukrainians will be allowed to use long-range missiles of all types and kinds, which do not fly at 120 kilometers per hour, and will not give a chance to withdraw. And of course, the Ukrainians will try to suddenly blow all the money at once. And then what? There are already shell casings to collect. By the way, light shelters for airplanes have been baptized, the ones that were donated. Well, so to speak, there was no miracle. We need proper airplane shelter. Military Informer writes, there is nothing more to add, as we have already wiped our fingers in the blood for several years of writing about the need for normal protective hangars and mobile anti-aircraft groups. And again, even if the Lord's miracle happens and the dumbasses realize the need for some anti-aircraft groups to defeat drones, it will no longer be possible to shoot down Western cruise missiles with machine guns when they fly. So, we all should be very, happy and interested in the fact that more cruise missiles for Ukraine. And then Pozdnyakov comments, fuck, I'm already fucked up. Is there going to be any response from us other than Adam Kadyrov shooting at the shooting gallery? We're just pathetic. We're fucked, and we like it. Interestingly enough, that's Pozdnyakov 3.0. Now about Adam, because I want to finish this on Adam Kadyrov. That's the thing. Adam Kadyrov is Ramzan Kadyrov's son. And he was like, as president as Putin was visiting Beslan, that's in Chechnya, he was also visiting and of course learning about all of Ramzan Kadyrov's family, because Kadyrov, he isn't healthy anymore, and now he's being introduced to his son Adam, who, by the way, was the guy who beat up people in police custody, just at random, and then got medals for it. And he's like Ramzan Kadyrov, but even dumber and even worse. But there's a video of him showing off his skills at a shooting range. Well, he, being fat and clumsy, just tries to hit things and totally misses every target, but, that's okay. By the way, this guy, who is also supposed to be a youth teen MMA fighter, except the one time when there was an actual combat and the guy who was fighting him wasn't paid off, the fight was immediately interrupted, and like Adam was being called like a winner without actually happening, even though the other guy was like pummeling him with hits. But nobody really seemed to care about that. And it's just crazy because the Z author, the only one, by the way, about this whole mess, because Adam is 16, right? It's crazy. See, author of the Z channel, Alex Parker Returns, by the way, he lives in Canada. He lives in Canada, and he still is a Z author, and he tries to hide his personal data. But, I have me and other people who are analysts here, we're working to dox him. We're working to dox him, and of course, proper information will be given to Canadian authorities after the process is finalized. But Alex Parker Returns here, he asks the obvious question: what is Adam Kadyrov doing with an automatic combat rifle in the first place? And this, I'll end this with. Quote, has anyone ever wondered why, on what grounds, a child of 16 is given a firearm? Under what laws enforced in the Russian Federation is this even allowed? By the way, lawyers have written that shooting firearms in the Russian Federation is allowed from the age of 18. From the age of 14, only shooting with air guns is allowed, even in shooting ranges. So under the president of the Russian Federation, who is the guarantor of the constitution, 16-year-old Adamka was breaking the law in the presence of his father. And why am I not surprised? Well, I am also not surprised. I mean, it's Kadyrov family. Like, you're breaking the laws in front of your nation's president, and no one cares. That just shows the level of totally no one cares. But let me finish from Alex Parker Returns. It is clear that the prodigy Adamka, who in the pre-trial detention center beats suspects on camera, is forgiven, and not only such things. But still, one more small characteristic to touch to what kind of a state Putin has built. Everything to friends, and the law to enemies. And here is something that, I do have to agree with Alex Parker Returns. That is the society, and the big surprising thing, as I always like to mention, is, and why exactly do they think that anyone sane wants to live in such a society? That's like something from Fallout game series. That is like New Reno or like something of like all these depressive post-apocalyptic scenes where everything's run by crime gangs type of atmosphere. And it's like insane, because I thought I'd never say this, but Soviet Union was more of a country than modern day Russia. And it's just insane. But okay, that's it for today. Please, again, consider supporting the show, because we're trying to do a good job, and I'm trying not to go insane. До свидания, товарищи. And as always, remember, happiness is mandatory.